For years, a couple poured their hearts into raising 6 rescued bobcats and a rare white lynx. They saved them from suffering, nursed them back to health, and built a sanctuary where the animals could finally thrive. Their whole life revolved around these magnificent creatures, until a life-changing job offer arrived from Colorado. It promised financial security, an end to their worries, and a chance to live near their only son. But their dream collided with a harsh reality: Colorado's strict wildlife laws. They faced an impossible choice. Accepting the job would mean surrendering the animals they'd raised like family. Refusing it would mean giving up the future they'd always imagined. They couldn't have both. Now, with their marriage and the lives of the animals on the line, they must decide what they are truly willing to lose. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The Montana wind, a wild and untamed thing, whispered through the lodgepole pines that stood like sentinels around Gerald and Deborah Rowe's secluded home. It was a sound they knew as well as their own breathing, a constant companion in their quiet corner of the world. But the true soul of their home wasn't in the whispering pines or the rugged peaks that clawed at the sky. It was in the 6 magnificent creatures that prowled, played, and slept in the sprawling, custom-built enclosures behind their house. They were family. Not pets, not exhibits, but family. Gerald and Deborah, both in their late 50s with faces etched by laughter in the harsh Montana sun, had poured their hearts into raising them. Each one was a rescue, brought to them as a fragile, orphaned cub under a special state permit that recognized their unique role as rehabilitators, not owners. There was Shadow, the patriarch of their feline clan, a stoic and wise old male whose amber eyes seemed to hold the secrets of the forest. He was the first, found shivering and alone after a wildfire had swept through his territory. Then came Bandit, a handsome Tom with a perpetually mischievous glint in his eyes, always the first to investigate a new toy or playfully stalk Deborah's boots as she cleaned. Willow, a sleek and graceful female, was the nurturer, often grooming the others with a maternal patience that warmed Deborah's heart. Alongside her were Rusty and Rocky, brothers who were inseparable. Rusty, the shy observer who would watch from a distance before cautiously joining in, and Rocky, his bold and brawny protector. And then there was Mira. Mira was a miracle, a whisper of snow and moonlight. She was a Canada lynx, not a bobcat, and her coat was a startling pure white, a genetic anomaly that would have made her a target in the wild. Found abandoned and near death, she was the baby of the family, delicate and ethereal. Her oversized, tufted paws seemed too big for her body, and her cry was a soft, plaintive mew that could melt the sternest heart. Deborah had spent countless nights nursing Mira back to health, feeding her with a dropper and cradling her tiny furred body against her chest for warmth. The bond between them was profound, a silent understanding that transcended species. Their life was a rhythm of feeding times, enclosure maintenance, and quiet evenings spent watching their 6 charges from the porch, mugs of steaming tea warming their hands. It was a simple life, but it was rich with a purpose that few could understand. The letter arrived on a crisp autumn afternoon, the air thick with the scent of pine and decaying leaves. It was from a prestigious engineering firm in Boulder, Colorado, an offer for Gerald that was more than a job. It was a golden parachute. The salary was staggering, enough to erase their financial worries, secure their retirement, and help their only son, Michael, who was studying business at the University of Colorado Boulder. "Deb, you have to see this," Gerald said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and excitement. He handed her the thick, cream-colored paper, his hand trembling slightly. Deborah read it, her eyes widening. Oh, Jerry, this is life-changing. The prospect of being closer to Michael was a powerful lure. They missed him terribly, their conversations reduced to weekly phone calls that always felt too short. The idea of weekend visits, of being there for his graduation, was a dream they hadn't dared to entertain. For weeks, their home buzzed with a new energy. They spread maps of Boulder on the kitchen table, circling potential neighborhoods. They talked late into the night, their conversations filled with what-ifs and imagine-whens. The Bobcats, attuned to the shift in their caretaker's energy, watched them with curious eyes. Bandit would bat at the rustling maps, while Shadow would sit silently, his gaze seeming to question the disruption. It was Deborah who first felt the prickle of unease. "I should check on Colorado's regulations," she said one evening, more to herself than to Gerald. "Just to be sure. Every state is different." Gerald, busy sketching out plans for a new state-of-the-art enclosure he planned to build in Colorado, nodded absently. "Good idea. It'll just be a formality. We have all the permits. Everything's above board." Deborah spent the next few days buried in research, navigating the labyrinthine websites of Colorado's Parks and Wildlife Department. The initial language was dense and bureaucratic, but as she dug deeper, a cold dread began to seep into her bones. The words leaped off the screen, stark and unforgiving. The private ownership of native felids, including but not limited to Lynx rufus, bobcat, and Lynx canadensis, Canada lynx, is strictly prohibited. She read it again and again, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. There had to be an exception. Theirs was a unique case. They weren't breeders or exhibitors. They were a sanctuary, a last resort for animals that could never survive in the wild. She found the section on exemptions, her hope flickering back to life. She spent a week compiling a comprehensive file. Copies of their Montana permits, letters of recommendation from veterinarians and local wildlife officials, a detailed history of each cat, and a heartfelt personal plea explaining their situation. They sent it off, certified mail, and waited. The waiting was an agony. The excited chatter about their future in Colorado ceased, replaced by a tense, heavy silence. Gerald tried to remain optimistic. "It'll be fine, Deb. They'll see our record. They'll understand." But Deborah couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. She spent more time than ever with the cats, her hands lingering as she stroked Shadow's thick fur, her voice soft as she cooed to Mira. It felt like she was memorizing them, bracing herself for a loss she couldn't yet name. The official response came not as a letter, but as a phone call. A man with a flat, dispassionate voice from the Wildlife Department informed her that their request for an exemption had been denied. "But you don't understand," Deborah stammered, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "These aren't pets. They were rescues. They can't be released. They'll die." "Ma'am, the law is the law," the man said, his tone unwavering. "There are no exceptions for rehabilitated animals being brought into the state. Your options are to surrender the animals to an accredited facility or to reconsider your relocation. Surrender them." The words were a physical blow. She knew what that meant. No reputable zoo or large-scale sanctuary would have space for 6 geriatric non-breeding bobcats. They would be taken, held for a time, and when no placement could be found, they would be euthanized. It was the cold, hard reality of the system. When she told Gerald, the color drained from his face. For the first time, the full weight of their dilemma settled upon them. It wasn't a logistical hurdle. It was an impossible choice. The rift between them started as a hairline crack and slowly widened into a chasm. Gerald, ever the pragmatist, tried to find a logical solution. "Maybe we can find a sanctuary here in Montana," he suggested one night, his voice strained. "A good one. We could vet it ourselves, pay for their care." "Jerry, you know as well as I do that's not possible," Deborah shot back, her voice sharp with pain. "Who has room for 6? They'd be separated. Shadow would be alone. Rusty and Rocky would be torn apart. And Mira. Who would understand Mira's needs? They'd see her as a liability. We are their home. We are all they have ever known." "And what about Michael?" Gerald's voice rose, a rare occurrence. "What about our future? We've worked our whole lives for an opportunity like this. I'm 58, Deb. This is my last chance to build a real nest egg for us. Are we supposed to throw that all away?" "They are our family," Deborah cried, tears welling in her eyes. "You can't just throw family away when it becomes inconvenient." Their arguments became a bitter refrain, echoing in the quiet spaces of their house. They began packing in a strained, resentful silence, the cardboard boxes stacked around them like monuments to their discord. Each item they wrapped, a photograph, a cherished book, felt like a step toward a future that was tearing them apart. Gerald saw a secure retirement and a life with their son. Deborah saw a betrayal of the deepest trust, an abandonment of the 6 souls who depended on them for everything. The cold front swept in from the north with a sudden, brutal ferocity, catching the forecasters by surprise. One moment, the sky was a clear, crisp blue. The next, it was a churning cauldron of bruised purple clouds. The temperature plummeted. The wind, no longer a whisper, became a vicious howl, rattling the windows and tearing at the roof. Then the snow began, not in gentle flakes, but in a blinding, horizontal torrent. They were in the living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes, the silence between them as thick as the snow outside. The power flickered and died, plunging them into the dim, unsettling twilight of the storm. It was then that Deborah heard it. A sharp, metallic clang, followed by a sustained, violent rattling from the direction of the enclosures. "What was that?" she said, her head snapping up. "Just the wind," Gerald mumbled, staring into the fire. But Deborah knew better. It was a sound that was wrong, out of place in the familiar symphony of the storm. A knot of pure dread tightened in her stomach. "No, it's something else." She grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from the mantel and pulled on her parka and boots. "Deb, don't be ridiculous. You can't go out in this," Gerald said, rising from his chair. "I have to," she said, her voice grim. She was already out the door before he could stop her. The wind hit her like a physical force, stealing her breath and driving icy needles of snow into her face. The beam of her flashlight cut a frantic, dancing swath through the whiteout. She fought her way toward the enclosures, her boots sinking deep into the rapidly accumulating drifts. The rattling grew louder, more desperate. As she got closer, she saw it. A large section of the corrugated metal roof over the main sleeping den had been torn loose by the wind. It was flapping violently, held on by a single corner, allowing snow and wind to pour directly into the area where the cats sought shelter. Her light swept across the interior of the den. 5 of the Bobcats were huddled together in the far corner, their fur matted with snow, their eyes wide with fear. But one was missing. "Mira!" Deborah screamed, her voice snatched away by the wind. She scrambled to the side of the enclosure, her light probing the shadows. She found her in a separate, smaller alcove, the one Mira preferred. She was curled into a tight ball, shivering so violently that her whole body trembled. Her white coat was dusted with snow, and she looked small and terribly vulnerable. She let out a weak, plaintive cry that tore through Deborah's heart. In that instant, everything fell away. The job, the money, the arguments. All that existed was the freezing, terrified animal in front of her. Suddenly, another flashlight beam cut through the darkness beside her. It was Gerald, his face a mask of concern. He took in the scene in a single horrified glance. The damaged roof, the huddled cats, the shivering white lynx. "Oh God," he breathed. There was no discussion, no debate. They moved as one, a seamless team driven by a singular purpose. "The tarps!" Gerald yelled over the wind. "In the barn!" And the rope. They battled their way through the blizzard to the barn and back, dragging heavy canvas tarps and coils of stiff, frozen rope. Working in the twin beams of their flashlights, their fingers numb and clumsy with cold, they fought to secure the flapping piece of metal. The wind was a malevolent beast, trying to tear the tarp from their grasp. Gerald, using every ounce of his strength, held it down while Deborah frantically tied it off, her knots clumsy but strong. They heaved bales of straw up against the walls for extra insulation and tossed more inside, creating a thick, warm bed for the terrified animals. It took them nearly an hour. By the end, they were soaked, freezing, and utterly exhausted. But the roof was secure. The den was protected. They stumbled back into the house, shedding their snow-caked gear in a puddle by the door. They didn't speak. They simply sank onto the hearth in front of the fireplace, letting the warmth of the flames seep into their chilled bones. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the muffled howl of the wind outside. Deborah stared into the flames, her mind replaying the image of Mira, shivering and alone. They would have been gone. If this had happened a month from now, they would have been in Colorado, and these animals would have been… where? In a concrete cage in a strange facility? Or worse. The thought was a physical pain. She turned to Gerald, her eyes shining with unshed tears in the firelight. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely a whisper. "I'm staying," she said softly. "I can't do it, Jerry. I can't leave them. It's not just for them. It's for myself. This is who I am. Taking care of them. It's part of me. If I leave them, I lose a part of my own soul." Gerald was silent, his gaze fixed on the fire. His face was a landscape of conflicting emotions. He thought of his son, of the future he had planned, of the financial security he had so desperately wanted for them. Then, he thought of the past hour, of his wife's fierce, protective love, of the two of them working together against the storm, of the look in Mira's eyes. He saw with a sudden and piercing clarity the truth of her words. Their life wasn't just about planning for the future. It was about honoring the commitments of the present. It was about the family they had built, both human and animal. Leaving would not just break Deborah's heart. It would break something fundamental in him, too. He slowly turned his head to look at her, his expression softening. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused palm enveloping hers. He gave a long, slow nod. "Then we'll stay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is their home. And it's our home, too." A single tear traced a path down Deborah's cheek. a tear not of sadness, but of profound, overwhelming relief. The chasm between them had closed. The next morning, Gerald made 2 phone calls. The first was to the engineering firm in Boulder, respectfully declining their generous offer. The second was to a lawyer, to inquire about the process of formally establishing a non-profit animal sanctuary. They called it Home Instinct Sanctuary. The years that followed were not easy. They poured every cent of their savings into the project, expanding the enclosures, building a small veterinary clinic on their property, and navigating the endless paperwork of running a non-profit. But they were happier than they had ever been. The sanctuary became a haven not just for their original 6, but for other non-releasable wildlife that had nowhere else to go. Their work gave them a renewed sense of purpose, a deep and abiding contentment that no 6-figure salary could ever have provided. Michael graduated from college and, to their surprise, took a high-powered corporate job in Chicago. He was successful, climbing the ladder with a speed that made them proud. He would visit once or twice a year, walking the grounds of the sanctuary with a kind of detached admiration. He loved what his parents did, but it was their world, not his. One autumn, nearly a decade after the Great Storm, Michael came for his annual visit. He was in his early 30s now, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. But there was a weariness in his eyes that his parents had never seen before. On his last evening, the 3 of them sat on the porch, just as Gerald and Deborah had done for so many years. The original 6 were old now. Shadow and Willow had passed peacefully of old age, buried under a towering pine tree overlooking the valley. The others were gray around the muzzle, their movements slow and deliberate, but they were safe and loved. "I put in my notice," Michael said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. Gerald and Deborah turned to look at him, surprised. "Did you get a better offer?" Gerald asked. Michael shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "No, I'm done with that life. All those years sitting in boardrooms chasing profits, it all felt so empty. I kept thinking about you 2, about the choice you made." He looked out at the enclosures, his gaze soft. "You gave up everything for them. The money, the big new life in Colorado. You chose them. You chose love and responsibility over convenience. I didn't get it when I was younger, but I get it now. That's a real legacy. That's a life with meaning." He turned back to his parents, his eyes shining with a newfound passion. "I want to come home," he said. "I want to learn everything. I want to help you run this place. I want to continue what you started." Deborah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes flooding with tears. Gerald sat frozen for a moment, stunned into silence, before a slow, wide grin spread across his face. He reached out and pulled his son into a fierce hug, clapping him on the back. Karma had repaid them, not with money or with an easy life, but with something infinitely more precious. It had brought their son home, not just to the mountains of Montana, but to the heart of their family's true purpose. As dusk settled over the valley, casting long shadows from the pines, the 3 of them sat together, a family complete, their legacy of compassion secure for another generation. The wind whispered through the trees, no longer a wild and untamed thing, but a gentle lullaby, a testament to the enduring power of a home built on love.